Sometime in 2020, mere months after the World Health Organization declared a novel pathogen, now known as the COVID-19 virus, as an international emergency, the Government of Canada, led by the time by Procurement Minister Anita Anand, was working behind the scenes with big pharma oligarchs to secure millions of doses of in-development vaccines for Canadians. And those contracts, well, they're top secret. But we now have the list of at least 35 of the government officials who signed non-disclosure agreements to view them. Tamara Ugolini here, reporting for Rebel News, and I'm going to remind you that the push to get every Canadian vaccinated with at least 2 doses of the various novel, still in clinical trials, COVID-19 vaccine was the largest mass vaccination campaign in Canadian history.
You deserve a government that's going to continue to say, get vaccinated. And you know what? If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't think you can get on a plane or a train beside vaccinated people.
And thanks to the Justin Trudeau Liberals who campaigned on open and transparent governance, we may never see the details and those contracts that were signed prior to the rollout of these novel products.
We'll make transparency a fundamental principle of our government.
But what's with all the scandals?
But as I mentioned, we now have the names, or the titles rather, of at least 35 government officials who became privy to these top secret details through an order paper question asked in the House of Commons a few weeks ago. Now, before we get into that, let me also remind you that the Public Health Agency of Canada was left with grotesque wastage in what was referred to as a surplus of COVID-19 vaccine, with an estimated 32.5 million doses remaining in inventory. The Office of the Auditor General estimated that to be the equivalent of $1 billion. All of this came about when conflict of interest riddled Minister of Procurement Anita Anand hastily signed secret contracts with the likes of Pfizer and never before brought a product to market, Moderna, in August of 2020.
Moderna, which has never had a drug or vaccine approved for market. In theory, the science behind the vaccine should work. In reality, no one knows for sure. Moderna's CEO promoted the company's technology and speed at this meeting at the White House March 2nd, which President Trump ran like an episode of Shark Tank.
We want it fast, okay?
At the time, it was said that the novel injections would take at least 12 to 18 months to reach the arms of awaiting Canadians eager to return to normal, as was promised if they did their part by taking 2 or more mRNA shots. But the novel injections were authorized under emergency use legislation by Health Canada a mere 4 months later in December of 2020 and rolled out to every adult over the age of 18 almost instantaneously. The Auditor General further reported that by January 19th, 2021, a mere 5 weeks after the emergency use authorization, Minister Anand had put in place 7 advance purchase agreements securing 414 million doses of the novel biologic products. 5 months later, by July of 2021, Canada had received more than 66 million doses of the vaccines, more than enough to twice vaccinate every Canadian eligible at the time, which were 12-year-olds and older. And we know that Canada has a population of just under 36 million people. As per the AG's report, 84.1 million doses have been injected into the arms of Canadians, and that enormous quantity of secured doses were brought to you by government officials who are hiding behind secretive contracts with the likes of Pfizer and Moderna. These agreements were brought on behalf of the Public Health Agency of Canada, based on advice from the COVID-19 Immunity Task Force, and finalized by Public Services and Procurement Canada. As a result of these contractual obligations to fulfill the 400+ million doses, members of Parliament in the House of Commons are asking to view the billions of dollars worth of contracts between the federal government and the novel COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers. But the Liberals want MPs and anyone involved to sign non-disclosure agreements before they're allowed to view the contracts, which leads many to wonder why and what was in those contracts. Facing scrutiny, Liberal MP and Parliamentary Secretary for Public Services and Procurement, Anthony Housefather, had this to say.
Why is there much more redactions, as my colleague said, in these documents than in other documents? It's because these documents were signed at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody was desperate for vaccines, when companies were being told to rush vaccine production, do testing in an unprecedented way, in a way they normally don't do it. So these companies were exposed to way higher liability, putting their products on the market than they normally would because they didn't do the type of testing that normally takes these drugs years to come to market. They did it all in less than a year. So that's why these companies said, if I'm going to deliver you this product that I haven't tested in my normal way, I want to have different conditions.
Did the government waive liability for an unprecedented product that did not undergo rigorous safety testing before it was rolled out? Remember Pfizer's president of international developed markets, Janine Small, who admitted in the European Parliament that they had to move at the speed of science, whatever that is?
Regarding the question around, did we know about stop immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
Now, in the House of Commons, MP Kelly McCauley requested the following through an order paper question. With regard to non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, signed by government officials related to COVID vaccine contracts, A, how many officials were required to sign such agreements? B, what is the breakdown of A, by job title, and C, how many of these NDAs are time limited versus how many are indefinite? Interestingly, Health Canada responded that they couldn't possibly answer the question. Have a look at this. The information requested is not systematically tracked in a centralized database. Health Canada, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research concluded that producing and validating a comprehensive response to this question would require a manual collection of information that could lead to the disclosure of incomplete information. So I guess they just won't answer it at all. And yet, the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, otherwise known as ISED, supplied an attached annex for a detailed response. As per the annex, there were 35 government officials through the ISED that were required to sign non-disclosure agreements to view the government's COVID-19 vaccine procurement contracts. Some of them are time limited, but many are indefinite. Of course, the individuals involved are listed only by title, so I'll just highlight a few of the main titles that I was able to connect to names. Number 1 is the Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Mona Nemer, appointed on September 26, 2017. As Canada's top scientist, she was asked to make recommendations to help ensure that government science is fully available and accessible to the public, and that federal scientists remain free to speak about their work. She signed 1 time-limited contract and 2 indefinite. Number 2 is the Deputy Minister of ISED, who is Catherine Blewett, as of June 20th, 2022. Number 3 is Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Industry Sector of the ISED, Eric Costin. Number 4 gets tricky. It titles the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister at the Office of the Chief Science Advisor. Again, that's Dr. Nemer from above. But when I emailed the office to inquire about this position, they said that the, quote, Office of the Chief Science Advisor does not have a Senior Assistant Deputy Minister position, end quote. The list goes on to detail additional government officials from the ISED before moving into number 21 that begins to detail those involved with the arm's length Government of Canada initiative called the COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force, listed as the secretary for the COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force, who was tasked with procuring and developing vaccines. I wasn't able to find specific titles that the list refers to, but there are 11 members, including 2 co-chairs, Joanne Langley and Mark Levanon, and 4 ex officio members, all unelected senior government officials. The National Research Council of Canada is detailed next. From the Director General to policy analysts, the Government of Canada Department pivoted quickly to support Canada's government-wide COVID-19 response. If you want to look further into these departments and the titles involved to connect some of the names back to them, then we will publish the list in full in the written component of this video report. And please stay tuned at rebelinvestigates.com as we have an outstanding access to information request in with the government asking for that agreement with Pfizer specifically. Thanks for tuning in and for continuing to support our independent journalism. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. Did you know that we have a special website that houses all of our exclusive reports? It can be found at rebelinvestigates.com. There you can chip in a few dollars if you're able to help offset the costs of filing access to information requests, appealing them, and of course, just to continue to support our independent reporting. rebelinvestigates.com. Thanks for your support.